There were many scandals and mysteries in John Wayne's life even before he became the iconic Western movie star. The FBI was keeping a careful eye on the man behind the cowboy hat and rugged smile. At long last, long-lost files from those years have been discovered. Unfortunately, the epic tale that fans had hoped for is not revealed concerning the Duke. Come explore with us the hidden side of John Wayne, the shadow he cast in the world. John Wayne represented the United States of America in the early 1970s. He embodied the archetypal cowboy hero, a resolute individual who never faltered in any film. Many believed he could do no wrong, and that his bravery and patriotism made him popular. Therefore, his admirers anticipated a continuation of his charisma when he agreed to a lengthy interview with Playboy magazine in 1971. However, his words that day continue to linger in the minds of his numerous admirers to this day. Wayne was interrogated regarding societal shifts, racial issues, and the state of America during that period. Readers were taken aback by his direct, severe, and frequently nasty response. He stated that, until black people are educated enough, white people should continue to hold power. Additionally, he disregarded the Native American land loss history, claiming he did not feel remorse for it. Beyond that, he insulted the LGBT community and panned films that portrayed their lifestyles. These statements were devastating to someone whom people looked up to as a hero. The remarks remained on the magazine's pages for a while. Since the nation was deeply split at the time, some people disapproved, others ignored it, and yet others rallied behind him. But as time went on and people became more conscious of issues of racism, bigotry, and equity, those phrases took on an increasingly ominous tone. When social media first emerged, people wasted no time sharing old interviews and articles. Plus, Wayne's interview was uploaded online in 2019. His comments were read aloud once more by the world, and the response was tremendous. His legacy was soon the subject of heated debate on Twitter and elsewhere online. A lot of people saw it as a betrayal. The man was revered as a representation of America's bravery and dignity. How hypocritical of him to talk so casually about the hardships endured by others. The younger generation, which had previously only heard about Wayne's legendary status, suddenly had a completely different impression of him. Some defended him, arguing that he was simply a product of his time and that his opinions were reflective of his period. While some thought those comments were harmful even in 1971, others thought they were extremely harsh. Everywhere people were talking about the conflict between recollection and reality. The dispute spread beyond the internet. At one point, California lawmakers considered declaring a John Wayne Day in his honor, but they ultimately decided against it after reviewing Wayne's comments from the interview. Since his comments had caused so much suffering, they could not bring themselves to honor him in such a manner. The dispute eventually spread to the Orange County airport that bears his name. Because it was unacceptable to pay tribute to someone who so openly advocated racist views, several organizations worked to have the airport renamed. Although the dispute has not been resolved in full, it highlights the enduring pain caused by those hurtful remarks. Many members of Wayne's family, notably his son Ethan, have taken up his cause. John Wayne should be remembered by his charity activities and film career. They say, the interview was just a small portion of his lengthy life. They want them to have a holistic view of the man, not merely a snapshot in time. There are many who feel this way, and they keep coming to his museum and celebrating his films. For some, his comments expose the man beneath the cowboy persona, and they refuse to see past them. There is currently an awkward silence whenever John Wayne is mentioned. A lot of people still watch his films. Old posters feature his visage all the time, and his voice is still heard in American culture. On the other hand, the interview is still hanging over us. It makes us question if heroes are ever truly remembered and whether art can ever be truly divorced from a person's values. If we're going to talk about art, let's look at how Wayne made an entire masterpiece that people still talk about today. The contentious political beliefs he holds. There was a famous actor named John Wayne in the past. His portrayal of courageous cowboys won him many fans and admirers. He remained vocal even as his environment shifted. His feelings for his country were deep and abiding. He thought it was crucial that the war in Vietnam was justified. The Green Berets was the film he directed based on the event. Not to go into great detail, but to demonstrate the soldiers' courage and fortitude. He seemed really eager to rally behind them and have everyone hail them as heroes. Wayne continued to believe communism was a threat that must be fought against even though he knew many others shared this view. He was an early member of the Motion Picture Alliance, an organization that worked to protect American values after World War II. The argument went something like this: we need to shield the nation and the film industry from potential communist influence. For a number of years, Wayne was in charge of the group since he was so dedicated. He thought Hollywood had a major responsibility. Films have the power to influence people's opinions locally and globally. He took it upon himself to make sure the films never lost their American spirit. John Wayne's group sent representatives to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, a federal agency that began investigating alleged communists in the entertainment industry. Actors and filmmakers who shared the investigators' message provided them with numerous identities. Wayne continued to make his voice heard long after World War II ended, when the U.S. entered the Vietnam War. To him, it was much more than simply preventing what he perceived as evil. It was about winning the fight. In his view, the United States had a promise to fulfill by aiding the Vietnamese people, just as it had done at other difficult periods in history. In his run for governor of California, he publicly supported allies like Ronald Reagan, demonstrating his political savvy. Even presidents with whom he disagreed occasionally received courteous greetings from him. Everyone throughout the globe took the Green Berets more seriously than a mere piece of entertainment. The film was too harsh and inappropriate for anybody who were near to the conflict or knew the anguish it was. Some felt it failed to portray the profound personal impact of actual combat. The conflict was portrayed in a biased manner, according to others, who felt it was more interested in appealing to patriotism than telling a tale. People began to question if it was a fearless defense of troops or if it was propaganda aimed at shaping public opinion. Some supporters recalled Wayne as the archetypal patriot, a man who spoke out for his nation when others remained silent, due to his unwavering commitment to his principles. His remarks, they said, did not allow much space for alternative viewpoints, and this offended others. These days, not everyone is singing John Wayne's praises. His films continue to draw audiences, but discussions concerning the values he upheld have progressed. In our memories, there was a cowboy who was not just tall, but also firmly committed to his beliefs. A portrayal of Native Americans. The heroic cowboy roles that John Wayne played in epic, dusty westerns won him fans. However, the ancestors of the Native Americans were frequently portrayed in a stereotypical light in these narratives. They acted as villains or remained as minor set pieces. Long ago, these tales began, and they led many to believe a biased narrative that portrayed settlers as heroes and Native Americans as villains. Among Wayne's filmography, The Searchers stands out. A man's desire to find his niece takes a dark turn as his fury gets the better of him. In that tale, the indigenous people are primarily portrayed as antagonists. More than just protecting his niece, the hero's emotions go deep. Because she is part of the other, he nearly hurts her. Many subsequent viewers found the concept extremely upsetting, and they started discussing how it wounded people's feelings and perpetuated harmful preconceptions. The legends had a way of making the Native Americans feel inferior and mute at times. They hardly spoke in many classic westerns. Despite the passage of time and the fact that actual history had progressed, these characters were frequently portrayed by non-native actors and portrayed as vicious or menacing. However, not all accounts were consistent. Native Americans were shown in Fort Apache as practical and smart. The film made an effort to demonstrate that they were sentient and deserving of respect. Even in their most empathetic adaptations, the story's white protagonist made the Native Americans seem helpless and in need of outside intervention. The public's perception that these images were inaccurate and unfair grew over time. In Little Big Man, a comedic and tragic film about growing up among the Cheyenne, the Native American character is shown as more than simply a stereotypical cliché. He or she has depth and a voice. The way people recall Wayne's story has been transformed by all of this. His defenders argue that he was merely carrying out his duties at the time and that he was faithful to cinematic conventions. Still, many modern-day viewers felt as though those films murmured cruel messages that normalized the erasure of other people's experiences. Plus, these classic films aren't just collecting dust in a museum right now. Their impact on public perception of Native Americans over many years makes them significant. Parents and educators observe them and discuss the reasons behind their pain or love. Museums and schools occasionally screen these films with fresh perspectives, shedding light on the film's glaring racism and sexism. In addition to his past of sending troubling messages to the present, Wayne has a history of making inappropriate comments, including insulting remarks about gender. What Wayne had to say about women in a lengthy interview he gave in 1971 shocked many. Someone wanted to know Wayne's thoughts on women's suffrage during the conversation. The idea that men and women should constantly be treated equally was not something he agreed with. Seemingly, He was concerned that standing up for women's equality would disrupt the world he was familiar with. His tone was cold and condescending, as if he didn't think powerful women belonged there. A lot of people were wounded by his remarks because they thought he didn't want women to be as successful as men. The subject of love and cinema was then brought up. Movies like Easy Rider and Midnight Cowboy were specifically named by Wayne as being sexually explicit. When he made derogatory comments about homosexual males using an outdated slur in one of those movies, it became much more offensive. In his eyes, romantic love between guys was strange and unsettling. On the other hand, he was very upbeat when discussing romantic love and how it was the best way to make movies. The problem was that it made the LGBT community feel erased and unimportant, as if their experiences didn't belong in a novel. Upon later learning those words, many experienced a surge of anguish and bewilderment. Those who saw Wayne's films as children often recalled him as a heroic protector. Hearing that the man they cheered for spoke in a manner that degraded others was strange. For some, it seemed as if a reassuring bedtime story had suddenly become icy. As if he were a man from another era. When similar views were more prevalent, others attempted to make sense of him. On the other hand, the pain persisted. It was clear that the remarks had an impact, and many viewers and readers took to social media to express their disapproval. One respondent said that such comments were unacceptable even in 1971, and that it was difficult to disregard the genuine pain that lay under the surface when one heard them again. According to an additional source, it seemed as though the hero was consistently courageous until it became clear that his heart was a shattered compass. Over time, Wayne's offspring took the reins and represented the family. They pleaded with the audience to keep the broader view in mind. He was a generous person who lived a long life and was devoted to his loved ones. However, for many, even that familial perspective couldn't erase the memory of those comments. After watching his films, audiences started to view them differently. They cherished the comforting tales, but they also served as constant reminders of what was absent. To add spice, there were aspects of John that remained hidden from public view. Now, let's delve deeper into his character. Varied tones of the movie symbol. Diverse experiences characterized John Wayne's life. Part of his enduring allure stems from this very fact. In his film roles, he personified the archetypal American cowboy, a resolute warrior who showed no mercy and an oversized hero who dared to dream big. When he wasn't filmed, though, he changed drastically. His close friends and family members have noted that he might be reserved and even uncomfortable in social situations, particularly with ladies. Attendees at the fashion evening said he seemed awkward with them at one point. Although some, including screenwriter James Grant, said that he was anxious about women who exuded confidence, critics like Emmanuel Levy recalled him acknowledging that he never pursued women. For an actor known for portraying powerful male characters, it was a peculiar touch. Despite his reserved nature, Wayne's private life was bustling with activity. Through his 3 marriages, he was able to grow his family to 7 members. In 1933, he wed Josephine Wayne, who would later become his first wife. Mary, Tony, Patrick, and Michael were their offspring, but they divorced soon after. Many people thought that Wayne's Hollywood life and the intrigue surrounding his relationship with Marlene Dietrich had anything to do with their 1943 divorce. He collaborated with Dietrich on several films, including Pittsburgh, The Spoilers, and 7 Sinners. They may have been romantically involved for about 3 years, according to several biographers. Even more outrageously, Dietrich allegedly had her agent obtain Wayne a contract to keep them working together since she was so head over heels for him. Wayne remarried after that chapter to Esperanza Bauer, also known as Chada. However, problems arose early on in their partnership. During their time together, they were plagued by jealousy and disagreements, which were exacerbated by rumors of Wayne's suspected romance with actress Gail Russell. Divorce was finalized in 1954 after their marriage deteriorated over time. Love, though, remained a possibility for Wayne. Isa, John, and Marissa were his other children from a previous marriage to Pilar Pleat. Although it was shorter in duration, that marriage too ended in 1973. Wayne never got back together with a bride after his 3 divorces, but he did spend his golden years with his secretary Pat Stacy, who became his friend. Wayne was creating a legendary film career at the same time as his personal life was a roller coaster of ups and downs. Wayne appeared in multiple films about soldiers and combat from 1940 to 1945, when the globe was engrossed in World Combat II. Records show that in just those 5 years, he was in no less than 7 films pertaining to the conflict. The Fighting CBS, Dark Command, Flying Tigers, The Long Voyage Home, Reunion in France, Back to Baton, and They Were Expendable were among these. As the actual conflict raged on in other parts of the world, each film depicted him as the heroic American standing firm against our adversaries. Looking back, this made a lot of people wonder. While many others were out in the field fighting, how did Wayne manage to play soldier after soldier on screen? It seemed like an unusual combination to some. His enlistment was voluntary, but in theaters, his image as a fighter was ubiquitous. People liked watching him because he was the epitome of bravery, even if he was never a soldier in actuality. The disparity between the man on screen and the man off screen further muddled his story. John Wayne's life was contradictory in many respects. An unstoppable man in the movies who tripped over love. A fictional hero who never faced actual enemy warfare. Someone who appeared unflappable under pressure, but would feel awkward and timid when the camera was not rolling. His legend remained unshaken despite these differences. They added depth, humanity, and maybe even a ghostly quality. A convoluted mythology. John Wayne, whose real name is Marion Robert Morrison, considered enlisting during a global conflict. Since he was the sole breadwinner for his family, he was granted a deferment, even though he had already filled out the necessary paperwork. He tried to convince himself it would be short-lived, that he would just do a few more films before offering himself up for service. He wished he could maintain his position in the industry despite the difficulty of Hollywood. However, he never actually served in the military during World War II. The draft regulations were subsequently revised in 1942. The assumption that maintaining stable society could be achieved by keeping families together led to the temporary exclusion of married males. His friend and fellow filmmaker John Ford, who had already served his purpose, was among many who found this unfair, but many others did as well. Tensions between the two actors surfaced during their 1945 film, They Were Expendable. Witnessing Wayne's efforts to perfect the salute for the camera irked Ford, a man with intimate experience of military life. Infuriated by the criticism, Wayne stormed off the scene after hearing his harsh remarks. Even in Hollywood, where the war cast a long shadow, that scene demonstrated how intense the feelings were. Wayne encountered non-combat related difficulties as the years went by. He started to notice his hair thinning in 1948, when he was just 41 years old. There are a lot of men fighting this silent war. Still, Wayne went with an audacious plan B. In his films, he began to wear wigs. He became known for his tough on-screen persona, complete with hairpiece, in his World War II dramas. Although he occasionally ventured out in public without it, it was frequently affixed to his head, assisting him in projecting the image that audiences anticipated. He was very honest about the fact that people took note. When asked, he would even make light of it, revealing that he had absolutely no remorse about it. Years later, in 1957, he made an odd decision in The Wings of Eagles. In that part, he let the audience see a different side of himself by not wearing his wig. It demonstrated that, despite his carefully crafted persona, he remained open to change, adaptation, and revealing a different side of himself. His wigs eventually became more than just an accessory. He worked very hard to maintain his larger-than-life appearance on film, and these artifacts were representations of his past. An item featuring John Wayne's wig from the 1967 Western El Dorado was sold at auction in 2010 for around $1,244. Another wig of his surfaced in 2013, barely a few years after that. Made with actual human hair, this one. It looks like a real scalp since each strand is tied in by hand. The combined value of the item and the pedestal it rested on was an astounding £6,250. In addition to their high quality, the wig's association with Wayne's legacy made them highly sought-after collectibles. But Wayne's own charming demeanor just added to its charm. He was never afraid to bring it up. Even though he was getting on in years, he managed to keep his wit and charm by making light of himself and making jokes about the wig. The wig even unintentionally brought a touch of humor to his films on occasion. The Quiet Man, The Kentucky Fighter, and The Road to Alaska all had brief scenes where it moved slightly, allowing viewers with keen eyes to recognize it. Rather than damaging his reputation, these gaffes served as a light-hearted reminder that even Hollywood heavy hitters had their eccentricities. However, Wayne's career was not without its serious moments. He went to the Utah deserts in 1954 with the rest of the actors and crew to film The Conqueror, a film about Genghis Khan. The tragic event wasn't the plot of the film, critics said afterwards. He was never a suitable match for the part. It had to do with the subsurface activity surrounding them. Nevada was the site of nuclear weapon tests, and the filming location was about a mile away. Nobody saw the danger coming at that moment. It was told to them that radiation could never reach them. A Geiger counter on set started to crackle noisily, but Wayne ignored it, assuming it was just a faulty instrument. Regrettably, no. Everyone on set was unwittingly breathing an invisible radiation that had seeped into the desert air. Downwinders were the people from Utah, Nevada, and Arizona who were either exposed because of their proximity to nuclear test sites or because they worked on the film. The subsequent years witnessed the manifestation of the impacts. It wasn't until 1964 that Wayne received his own lung cancer diagnosis. Although doctors were able to preserve his life by removing one lung and multiple ribs, he would later suffer from stomach cancer. At long last, it took him in 1979. Tragically, Michael and Patrick, two of his sons, had also been on that desert scene when they were little youngsters. Not only that, but they both got cancer, yet by 1981, they had beaten it. Chilling figures are associated with the Conqueror. In the end, cancer struck over 90% of the 202 film crew members. Not only was John Wayne there, but so was the film's director, Dick Powell, and star, Susan Hayward. What should have been another Hollywood production became one of the most sad chapters in cinema history as the desert, where they had once laughed, worked, and constructed their story, had quietly poisoned them all. There is a lot of debate surrounding John's life, but his death and his last words were the parts that people still didn't understand. To find out what happened, continue watching. His final moments shrouded in secrecy. John Wayne's life took a dramatic turn in 1964 at the age of 55, and not even his Hollywood stardom could save him. He was diagnosed with lung cancer by the doctors. Furthermore, that prognosis was frequently considered fatal in those days. Such news might be devastating to a man's career in an industry that relied so heavily on outward displays of strength and masculinity. The world might no longer perceive him as the courageous soldier or rough cowboy he had always pretended to be. His advisors were afraid. At first, Wayne gave in to their demands that he remain quiet and cover up what was happening. Fearless in the face of public scrutiny, he stealthily made his way to the hospital to battle for his life. It was a terrible operation. A full lung and multiple ribs were removed by the medical staff in order to increase his chances of life. Despite the procedure's effects on his strength and appearance, he managed to recover and go on. And Wayne did something unexpected instead of keeping his difficulties secret. After he made it through, he felt the need to share his story with the world. He displayed bravery both on and off screen when he came forth and spoke to his struggle. He believed that the most powerful representation of himself was the man who stared illness in the face and continued to live, even though it was accompanied by the image of a proud cowboy on horseback. He was able to cling to the image that characterized him at that very moment. Not in a way that belies someone who has never faced adversity, but as someone who has always stood firm. He persisted in his job for a further 15 years, refusing to let his disease dampen his enthusiasm. His determination was greater than the illness he had conquered before, and he went on to appear in nearly 24 further films and television roles. Still, he had more surprises in store from fate, the most significant of which occurred in 1976. He was a character in The Shootist, a film about a retired gunslinger who gets cancer news. It was devastating, strong, and unfiltered. That said, nobody could have predicted how near it would get to being a reality back then. Just 3 years later, in 1979, real life mirrored the play he had performed. Doctors discovered something far more terrible during what was supposed to be a routine operation to remove his gallbladder. A cancerous tumor was concealed within his stomach. They acted swiftly to remove the organ in the hopes that it might save his life. The cancer, however, had progressed too far. Compared to earlier, this time was different. The competition was intense, and he faced insurmountable odds right from the start. Wayne, though, never once let his fear show. He exuded the same fearlessness that had captivated audiences for generations. He seemed unflappable and unwavering to the general population. The truth, however, was known to those closest to him. The toll it was taking was plain to observe. In those still seconds, his strength melted away into exhaustion and the realization that his struggle was winding down. Despite this, he never allowed his illness to define him. He never wavered from being himself. John Wayne continued to strive to maintain the powerful persona the world had come to know him for even as his health deteriorated. Everybody in the room stood up when he entered the stage at the 1979 Academy Awards in April. The crowd went absolutely wild, celebrating both his career and the fact that they were seeing a final departure. He seemed thinner and frilier than before, yet he still had that fire in his eyes. The identical charisma that had characterized him for many years. His wit and determination remained unaltered, despite his lower voice. Like the Oscar statue, which had endured for nearly as long, he recounted his lengthy career in Hollywood. Just beneath the surface of the joke was a man proudly proclaiming to the world that he had stood strong through storms and battles. In doing so, he assured his supporters that he had not given up the struggle within. When you think about Wayne's life, what do you see? Will his legacy outlive his controversies, in your opinion? Leave a comment with your ideas. Please like, subscribe, and enable notifications.